I had been at Heian Systems for 17 years, long enough to watch the company crawl out of a rented storage unit and grow into a corporate machine that never seemed to sleep. I wasn't the founder, but I might as well have been part of the foundation. Arthur Heian, the man whose name sat on the building, often told me processes made permanence, and I carried that truth in every contract, every compliance check, every frantic midnight call when something was about to break. Titles never mattered much to me, though. Officially, I was Chief Operations Liaison. What mattered was that everyone in the building knew I was the person who made sure the gears never ground to a halt. That was before Arthur's health failed. He began missing meetings, forgetting names, losing the spark that once powered his empire. The board grew nervous, and nervous boards make hasty choices. Instead of looking inward for steady hands, they looked to blood ties and handed the reins to Arthur's nephew Bryce. Bryce with a Y. A man who walked into the office on his first day talking about synergy like he had just invented the word. He strutted in two-button suits, loafers polished like mirrors, the smug confidence of someone who had never fought for a parking spot. Arthur had trusted me. Bryce barely looked at me. He scrolled his phone in meetings, eyes glued to crypto memes, while I kept the machine running. He replaced trusted staff with fraternity brothers who knew more about margarita nights than procurement strategy. He renamed our internal wiki Bryce Notes and introduced Fun Shirt Fridays as if novelty could mask incompetence. I didn't fight him. I smiled, nodded, and quietly took stock. Being underestimated is a strange gift. While Bryce waved the flag of modernization, I revisited old files, dusted off forgotten charters, and found the legal tripwires Arthur and I had planted years ago. Arthur was paranoid about nepotism undoing his work. So together we wrote safeguards into the bones of the company clauses sharp enough to cut through arrogance if ever triggered. I had kept them alive, notarized, and updated, year after year, even when everyone else forgot they existed. I knew the day would come, though I didn't know when. Bryce wasn't the confrontational type. He was the kind who scheduled quick syncs at 7:30 a.m., then acted like he was doing you a favor. And so, it was no surprise when one Tuesday morning at 7:56 a.m., I received a sudden meeting request. By 7:59 a.m., I was sitting across from Bryce in HR's conference room. He sipped green sludge from a mason jar, legs crossed like he was auditioning for a yoga retreat. Melissa from HR sat beside him with the stiff posture of someone drafted into battle against her will. "Jennifer," he began, pronouncing my name like it carried a sour aftertaste. He spoke of strategy reviews, modernization, and finally said the company was sunsetting my role. He actually smiled when he said it. Sunset. As if 17 years of holding this place together was just a failed marketing campaign. He threw in a line about my historical contributions. The word historical dragged out like I was some fossil cluttering his museum of innovation. I didn't flinch. I smiled, nodded, and left without a scene. But I had been ready for this moment. That same morning, I deposited my final paycheck, stamped the time for proof, then drove straight to a notary public with a sealed envelope already prepared. Within the hour, a courier was carrying that envelope across the city, bound for the company's general counsel. Inside was not a resignation letter, nor a plea, but a formal execution notice tied to the 2009 Operational Reversion Agreement. A clause that stated if I was ever terminated without full board approval and proper severance, operational control of Heian Systems would revert within 72 hours to the founder's trust and the successor named therein. Bryce didn't know it yet, but he had just pulled the pin on his own grenade. From my car parked across the street, I watched him strut out of the office later that morning, laughing with one of his fraternity hires. He had no idea the countdown had already begun. He thought he'd swept me out like dust on Slack, posting a gif of a broom with the caption "Spring cleaning." Baby. Out with the old. His friends reacted with fire emojis and clapping hands, never realizing he had just set fire to the floor beneath them. Back at my desk at home, I logged every timestamp termination, notary seal, courier dispatch, legal receipt lined up in perfect order. That evening, the general counsel emailed me one short line. Please confirm whether you have executed the reversion clause outlined in Article 4.8. I replied with 2 words, executed. Confirmed. The whispers began the next day. Quiet at first, like cracks forming in concrete. By Thursday, Bryce had fired 3 more senior staffers, replacing them with more college buddies under ridiculous titles like head of organizational vibes. Screenshots and spreadsheets flowed to me through back channels, loyalists sending proof of his chaos. And all the while, the clock ticked. The 72 hours narrowing. The weight of the claws pressing down unseen. Bryce still thought he was untouchable. He was too arrogant to notice the foundations shifting under him, too blind to realize the building was already collapsing in silence. By Friday afternoon, the cracks in Bryce's illusion had begun to spread wide enough for the whole company to notice. From the outside, he and systems still looked steady glass towers reflecting the city skyline, busy employees moving through security gates, strategy decks being polished for board review. But inside, the rot was undeniable. Bryce had pushed out people who had built the place with their sweat and replaced them with his fraternity friends. One old college roommate, Zach, was suddenly chief strategy architect, despite never working in tech. Another, Kyle, somehow landed the title of head of organizational vibes, which might have been funny if it weren't tragic. Staff who had been with us since the scrappy years were being shown the door, escorted out without goodbyes. Patrice, who had once brought me soup during flu season, was dismissed without ceremony. She had built the onboarding framework from scratch, balancing spreadsheets while pregnant with twins. To Bryce, she was just another relic of the past, expendable in his rush to surround himself with yes-men. Meanwhile, messages kept reaching me. Screenshots of Slack threads, whispers of discontent, spreadsheets Bryce had claimed as his own after slapping optimized by Bryce across formulas I had written years before. He didn't even bother to change the formatting. Loyalty, it turned out, didn't vanish just because I was no longer on payroll. Some people still believed in the foundation Arthur had built, and they knew I had protected it. That Friday, I caught a glimpse of desperation in the company's HR portal. My access, long since revoked, flickered back online for just a moment. It was enough to see someone had tried altering the date on my termination, shifting it to 2 days later. A clumsy attempt to bend the 72-hour reversion clause in their favor. But history doesn't bend easily when the historian kept receipts. I had timestamps from my deposit, the notary seal, the courier slip, and the delivery signature all locked down on Tuesday. Their rewrite was a farce. My lawyer's reply to the update was only 2 words. Let them. By Monday morning, the board gathered for what was supposed to be a routine review. Bryce came swaggering in late, wearing jeans and a quarter-zip pullover like he fancied himself the next Steve Jobs. He stood at the head of the table, pacing, talking about Halcyon 2.0 as if rebranding slogans could fix incompetence. He spoke of vertical growth, decentralized strategy, legacy drag, all the hollow buzzwords he collected like trophies from motivational podcasts. The board members listened politely, though their eyes revealed impatience. But one person wasn't smiling, Lisa. Our general counsel. She was flipping through a thick manila folder, pausing at a page that froze her in place. When she finally spoke, Her voice cut through the air like a blade. Sorry to interrupt, but a document just came in over the weekend. Notarized, time-stamped, delivered by legal courier. It references Section 4.8 of the Operational Reversion Agreement. Bryce scoffed, waving a hand. If it's from Jennifer, ignore it. She's just making noise. Lisa's tone never wavered. It's not noise. It's valid. The room stilled. Even the board chair, Meredith, who had weathered years of corporate storms, leaned forward, eyes narrowing. How old is this clause, she asked. 2009, Lisa replied, turning the folder so the signatures were visible. It was reaffirmed in the 2018 compliance cycle, signed by Arthur Heon and 2 prior board members. It remains active. Bryce laughed nervously. So what? She found an old footnote. You can't undo a CEO with paperwork. But Lisa didn't flinch. This isn't just paperwork. The clause was designed to prevent unilateral termination of key personnel without full board approval. By firing Jennifer, you triggered it. We're already 48 hours into the 72-hour countdown. The silence that followed was suffocating. Bryce tried to recover, talking about symbolism, about ceremonial clauses that didn't hold weight. Lisa shut him down cold. It is enforceable. And if we don't resolve it, operational control reverts to the founder's trust. Meredith turned her eyes on Bryce, her expression unreadable. Do you realize what this means? Bryce muttered about contests, injunctions, challenges. But Lisa had already pulled another folder black this time. She placed it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside was the notarized clause, signed and initialed by both Arthur and me. She looked Bryce straight in the eye. It's not just real, Bryce. It's active. And unless we find an updated override which doesn't exist, the company reverts to the successor named in the trust in less than 24 hours. For the first time, Bryce's polished facade cracked. He paced the room, voice rising, grasping at arguments that crumbled as fast as he spoke them. He begged to call Arthur, to contest the trust, to find loopholes. Lisa reminded him he wasn't authorized to make contact. The only non-family individual with access was me. When Meredith finally spoke again, her voice was calm but final. So we wait. And when the clock runs out, the name in that envelope decides the future of this company. And just like that, Bryce realized the walls were closing in. By Tuesday morning, Bryce looked like a man unraveling. The swagger was gone, replaced by sleepless eyes and hair that stuck up in ragged tufts. He paced the boardroom, muttering about betrayal and legacy, his startup charisma rotting into raw desperation. The board sat stiffly, phones off, folders stacked neatly before them. Every hour ticked louder than the last. Meredith, calm as always, opened the session with no pleasantries. We've confirmed the clause is active. We've confirmed the conditions were triggered. The trust stands. Then she looked to Lisa. Lisa's voice was sharp, stripped of anything resembling comfort. The next step is to confirm the identity of the appointed successor. She placed a sealed manila envelope on the table, the kind of envelope that carries weight heavier than any gold. This has not been opened since it was placed in trust custody in 2019. Inside is the founder's chosen appointee. Bryce gave a bitter laugh. You can't be serious. We're going to decide the fate of a billion-dollar company with an envelope. What is this corporate Willy Wonka? No one humored him. Lisa slid a letter opener across the seal, pulled out a single ivory sheet, and read it silently. Her eyes hardened. Then she passed the paper to Meredith, who read it and exhaled sharply. Around the table, the page moved from hand to hand, each face turning sober, each pair of eyes confirming the same name. Bryce's voice cracked as he demanded, "Say it! Someone say it out loud!" Finally, Meredith turned to him. Jennifer L. Crane. The words fell like a stone in still water, sending cracks rippling outward. Bryce stumbled back, color draining from his face. No, no, that's not possible. She was just operations. She was trusted. Lisa interrupted. He spun on her. You knew. I suspected. She admitted. But I didn't know until now. He raked his hands through his hair, laughing wildly. So what you're telling me, I fired the woman who now legally controls this company. Yes, Meredith said simply. That's exactly what you did. From that moment, Bryce spiraled. He called me 6 times that day. The first voicemail dripped with false charm. Hey, Jennifer, look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Let's talk. The second was shakier, mentioning legal confusion and a desire to clarify. By the third, his voice cracked into pleading. Please call me back. Please. I didn't answer. I let them pile up, proof of his panic. Silence was my reply, and silence spoke louder than any words. Inside the company, the truth was seeping out. Venture Ledger got wind of a legacy clause in play. Tech journalists began circling, calling PR for comment. One local station sent a camera crew to film nervous interns smoking outside the building. The Slack channels became a battlefield of rumors and leaks. Employees asking if I was coming back. One accountant even replied, all to a leadership update email with 3 words, "Is Jennifer back?" That message found its way to me through 5 different inboxes, each forwarded with its own emoji reaction. By late afternoon, the board decided Arthur had to be informed. His health had declined, his speech limited, but he remained legally competent in short bursts. Lisa and a trust executive flew out to see him. Bryce wasn't allowed in the room. When Lisa returned hours later, her expression said everything before her words did. The founder has been informed. He was shown the clause, the timestamps, the trust directive. She paused, then added, when he saw the name of the appointee, he smiled. That single word, smiled, landed harder than any gavel. Bryce exploded, shouting about sentimentality and loyalty overruling innovation. He insisted he had built this company up, that he was the future. Lisa cut him down with one sentence, no. Bryce, you inherited a seat at the table. She built the table. The board said nothing. The silence was worse than any rebuke. There were 9 hours left on the clock. 9 hours until the clause locked into place. 9 hours until Bryce's frantic denial turned into legal fact, and I hadn't said a single word. I didn't need to. The clock was speaking for me. The final morning arrived without ceremony. The board gathered in the same sterile room, legal documents stacked like tombstones. The air was thick, the silence reverent. At exactly 8:00 a.m., a courier arrived with a slim envelope. Meredith opened it, revealing a notarized cover letter, a packet of validation documents, and a flash drive holding the audit trail. Lisa reviewed it and nodded once. It's done. Bryce laughed nervously from the corner. So what now? She just waltzes in wearing a cape. And right on cue, the door opened. I walked in. No cape, no entourage, just a sharp black suit, my old Heon badge pinned to the lapel, and a single flash drive in hand. I walked straight to the head of the table and sat. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Actual leadership had returned, and everyone knew it. The room seemed to breathe differently once I sat down. For years I had worked behind the scenes, never raising my voice, never demanding the spotlight. Yet in that moment the air itself shifted. No one questioned who belonged at the head of the table. Meredith looked around slowly, then declared, Jennifer Crane has assumed operational oversight under Section 4.8 of the Operational Reversion Agreement, effective immediately. She turned to Lisa, who confirmed. Clause executed. Chain of command has shifted. It was official. I was in control. A motion was called. Hands raised. One after another. No one opposed. Bryce cleared his throat desperately. You can't be serious. You're just handing her the keys. This is my company. I didn't look at him. I slid my flash drive into the port before me, and the main dashboard lit up. A company-wide message populated instantly. The title, Steady Hands, Clear Eyes. The message was brief, steady, rooted in continuity and integrity. No theatrics, no slogans. It didn't even need my name, every employee already knew. Security arrived quietly. Bryce saw them and tried to bluster. Don't bother. I'll go. He turned to me, eyes burning. You really think you won? You blindsided me with some dusty clause and think that makes you a leader. Finally, I looked at him. My voice was calm, almost gentle. Bryce, nepotism's cute until it collides with the charter. He froze, the last ounce of bravado draining out of him. I handed him a single sheet of paper, his separation agreement already prepared, already signed by the board. He took it numbly. As he clutched the page, I leaned close enough for only him to hear. Consider this your final lesson. With that, it was over. Bryce left the building without another word, his polished loafers clicking hollowly down the corridor. The board dispersed in silence. No grand speeches, no applause, just the gravity of transition settling into the bones of the company. I remained at the table for a moment longer, letting the reality take root. After 17 years, after watching Arthur's vision corrode under arrogance, I wasn't just the person keeping the gears turning, I was the one holding the wheel. Word spread through the company in waves. Screens lit up with the announcement, and employees who had felt invisible under Bryce's reign began to breathe again. Slack threads buzzed with cautious optimism. Someone forwarded me a screenshot from a channel where an intern wrote simply, "She's back." The replies filled with emojis clapping, hearts. Even the rare confetti burst. It wasn't celebration yet, but it was relief. Relief mattered. Over the following hours, I walked the halls not as a ghost, but as a leader. The cafeteria quieted as I passed, not from fear but from recognition. People who had averted their eyes during my exit now met mine again, tentative smiles forming. I didn't stop for speeches or applause. Instead, I listened. I asked the payroll team what resources they needed. I checked in with compliance about outstanding audits. I sat beside the engineers during lunch and asked about system stability. Simple acts, but after months of performative leadership, they felt radical. Later that day, I stood in Arthur's old office. He was no longer there. His health kept him at home, but his presence still lingered in the room. The bookshelves, the battered briefcase, the framed quote he loved. Processes make permanence. I thought about how he used to lean on me during the company's infancy, how we drafted those protective clauses late into the night, laughing over bad coffee and worse takeout. He had trusted me to guard the foundation, and now, all these years later, that trust had circled back with unflinching clarity. I wasn't naive. I knew stepping into power meant inheriting chaos. Finances were strained, morale was fractured, and too many good people had been driven out. But unlike Bryce, I didn't see these as burdens. They were challenges worth tackling because this company had always been more than balance sheets and buzzwords. It was built on loyalty, on grit, on the kind of dedication that doesn't show up in quarterly reports. That evening, after the building quieted, I sat alone at my desk, the same battered desk I had insisted on keeping. The city hummed outside the windows, neon lights flickering against the glass. I opened my legal pad and began mapping the next steps. Reinstate key staff where possible. Audit every reckless decision Bryce had pushed through. Stabilize before rebuilding, step by step, process by process, permanence by permanence. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard Arthur's voice again, steady and amused. The person who understands the foundation holds the power to shake the house. Bryce had thought power came from titles, from flashy slogans, from being the loudest in the room. But real power had always lived quietly, in the person who understood the structure deeply enough to protect it or dismantle it if needed. And now, that person was me. The following days unfolded like aftershocks from an earthquake. The tremor had already passed, but the building still swayed. Departments scrambled to adjust. Teams that had been hollowed out by Bryce's ego slowly stitched themselves back together. Some employees were still skeptical, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But most understood instinctively that the storm had ended. I didn't return with fire and brimstone. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on steady hands. The first thing I did was call back 3 senior staffers Bryce had shoved aside. Patrice, still raw from her abrupt dismissal, cried when I asked her to return. She didn't want an apology, only a chance to finish what she'd started. Payroll, vendor relations, onboarding, these weren't glamorous departments, but they were the spine of the company. And bringing them back was like reconnecting veins after surgery. Blood could flow again. The frat bro hires were another matter. Some left voluntarily, sensing the tide had turned. Others lingered, hoping to bluff their way into usefulness. I didn't waste energy on theatrics. I simply set clear expectations, results, or removal. Most were gone within a week. Meanwhile, I met with each department head, not to dictate, but to listen. Engineers spoke of systems Bryce had tried to optimize into chaos. Marketing revealed half-finished campaigns scrapped because they didn't fit his vibe. HR confessed they had been pressured into bending timelines and backdating records. None of it surprised me. I had lived long enough in the shadows of incompetence to know the smell of rot. When I finally addressed the company as a whole, it wasn't with a speech rehearsed in front of a mirror or written by consultants. I stood in the atrium, microphone in hand, and spoke plainly. This company was never built on slogans. It was built on your work, your ideas, your loyalty. Arthur believed processes made permanence, but processes don't write themselves. People do. You do. And as long as I'm here, you won't be treated like friction in someone else's ego trip. You'll be treated like the foundation you are. Applause broke out, not thunderous, not choreographed, but genuine. Relief, hope, maybe even pride. That sound mattered more than anything Bryce had ever demanded. Outside the building, the story was already circulating. Headlines framed it as a corporate coup, a clash between nepotism and legacy. Journalists called it a rare example of old safeguards snapping back into power. Some wrote about the importance of governance, others about the folly of ignoring history. I didn't chase the coverage. Let them write what they wanted. The people inside the building knew the truth, and that was enough. Still, in quiet moments, I thought of Bryce, not with anger, not even with satisfaction, but with a kind of detached pity. He had walked into a fortress thinking it was made of glass. He thought charisma could replace competence, that performance could stand in for permanence. He thought he had the board in his pocket, the staff under his thumb, and the company at his mercy. But he never bothered to learn the foundation. And when you don't understand the foundation, you can't see where the cracks will spread. Arthur had once told me that real leadership wasn't about being the loudest or the flashiest. It was about stewardship, guarding something so it could last beyond you. He trusted me with that stewardship, and I had honored it quietly for years. Bryce had mocked me for it, called me historical, dismissed me as museum energy. Yet history is the very thing that keeps a company alive. History teaches us what not to repeat, what's worth preserving, and when to protect against arrogance dressed as progress. In the end, Bryce wasn't my enemy. He was just the inevitable test of Arthur's foresight. The clause wasn't vengeance, it was continuity. And continuity is what saved us. On my first Friday as acting head, I stayed late in the office. Most of the staff had gone home, the building humming with the soft mechanical rhythm of servers and lights. I walked the halls slowly, peering into glass offices, conference rooms, workstations. This place wasn't just an employer. It was a living testament to every person who had believed in it, sacrificed for it, grown with it. I thought of Arthur's briefcase in his old office, of Patrice's tears, of the intern who had typed "she's" back into Slack. I thought of 17 years spent holding things together in the dark. And I realized something. The lesson wasn't about revenge, or even justice. It was about the power of preparation, the strength of loyalty, and the quiet resilience of those who understand that permanence is built process by process, choice by choice. Bryce had been a storm, but storms always pass. What mattered was the foundation that remained standing when the sky cleared. That foundation was Arthur's vision, my work, and the loyalty of people who refused to forget what truly mattered. As I shut off the lights and stepped into the night, I felt no triumph, no gloating, just calm. I had been underestimated, dismissed, cast aside. Yet in the end, the foundation held, and I had done what I was meant to do, protect it until it was strong enough to stand again. So here's the reflection. The lesson worth carrying: never mistake quiet strength for weakness. Never underestimate the one who knows the structure better than anyone else. And never forget that history has sharp teeth when neglected. If you've been with me through this story, thank you. If it resonated, if it made you think about leadership, loyalty, or the quiet power of preparation, then do me a favor, share, and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment with your thoughts, because stories only live when they're shared.